Welcome to the Earl Farrell Show.
It's a mighty busy place when a broadcast is being made from the studio.
Live from the AM 990 studios in East Memphis. And now, here's Earl Farrell.
His job is to see that the broadcast proceeds smoothly and without breaks.
I've been punched many a time in my life, but never for hiring anybody.
And welcome to Earl Farrell for Memphis on a Friday. Yes, say it again, Friday afternoon. And we've got a special guest in studio today. I actually met him several weeks ago. It was at George Klein's Appreciation Day just down the street at Bud Davis Cadillac. And tall, distinguished gentleman standing over there. I said, well, he doesn't look like he belongs here. Yeah, they say that. He said, somebody get security. In fact, he was in security for Bell System. He was there. He also has Masters of Criminal Justice, Ole Miss. I'm not going to hold that against him. Just kidding. I went to the University of Texas, but both my kids, my son graduated from Mississippi State, and my daughter is there now.
Oh, howdy-toddy.
We had a great time, though, when Texas came down and played you guys last year.
Oh, yeah.
That was fun. And,
Wow.
I think they got along great, too. I mean, they're really very similar type folks.
Yeah.
Texans are not exactly wallflowers, and neither are the Ole Miss Rebel fans. And he's also a Ministry of Prisoners of the Lord, and he is a native of Tupelo, Mississippi, just down the road. And his name is Merle Temple, and he just completed a novel called A Ghostly Shade of Pale. And welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks. Good to be here.
Now, you've been globetrotting, at least scouring the country. You were out on the West Coast and completed a run out there. You got your picture here with Joe Montagna and Seymour Moore, Criminal Minds. You met it on TV, radio, all over the place out there. And the book signings, it's all going very well.
Yeah, the Ghostly Shade of Pale has been out about 2 months, and the reviews are good, the sales are good, and Criminal Minds, some of the folks out there liked it, gave us a thumbs up on it, and began to set up meetings with Hollywood producers and asked us to come out, and it was a fairy tale trip. We just met so many nice people. I got to tell you, Earl, they thought I talked kind of funny, but I thought they talked funny.
Here's what you tell them. It's just like when I moved to Canada as a kid, and we were talking about this today, that people would say, talk for us. I go, what do you want me to say? And then just die laughing. I go, what is so funny? And the way you talk, I said, you are the ones that talk funny. I had never heard anything. And it is funny, but I always tell people, your accent is a definitive part of you, and you can't manufacture it. A lot of people try to in movies and on television. But I think the people who have no accent are the real losers in all of it, because your accent is part of where you're from and your environment and the people that you grew up around.
Well, I can't tell you how many times I was asked to say, thank you very much.
They think we all say that here, or just because you're from the Tupelo and Memphis and Elvis connection?
Yeah, they were real nice about it, but, definitely being from Tupelo and the Memphis area, the Elvis thing, came up. And when I was on KKLA, one of the bumper tunes they played was by Elvis, and they were all giving me the thumbs up from the control booth.
Yeah, I was somebody from Fox this morning was doing an interview with somebody in Memphis, and the rest of the country goes a lot crazier than we do here in Memphis on Elvis Week, because it's just part of our culture here. But next week is a big week. There'll be a lot of people in. I'm doing some interviews for Fox, and Norbert Putnam, who is one of Elvis's studio musicians and producers, and we're interviewing him and just some other people that we haven't talked to too much before. A lot of stories still out there, but storytelling is really. Have you always been a storyteller?
Well, I think so, and plus I was a beneficiary of the Southern culture, which is big on oral stories, passing them down from generation to generation. And my grandmother Pearl, who I keep in this novel with her real name, was certainly made history come alive for me and our ancestors and so on. And she asked me over 50 years ago to never forget her, like that was possible. But I kept that promise that I would not in this novel, and paid tribute to her, because Ghostly is written as fiction, but it's based on things that happened to me when I was fresh out of Ole Miss in the early 70s, and I emphasize the word fresh, naive, wet behind the ears, totally unprepared for what I was about to get into. President Nixon had just declared the first war on drugs in 1970. And so right out of Ole Miss, I went into the newly formed Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics. And so Ghostly chronicles a lot of that, the good, the bad, and the tragic that took place. And it was a rich time to live in, and certainly a rich time to draw from as an author, because so many divergent challenges were colliding on the same stage all at once during that time period. And I feel like America kind of lost its way during that time.
Well, it was a convergence of a lot of different forces. I know you and I both grew up in an era and in places where you didn't have to lock your door, that people didn't steal. And I mean, talk about community wide. There just weren't thieves, and there weren't, because there wasn't a need to. People worked. And what we saw happening with the advent and the increased usage of drugs was that they weren't going to go out and work a regular job and then go get drugs. They don't do anything. They do drugs. And so the way they got money was stealing and robbing. And so therefore a culture developed that we'd never seen before, where your next door neighbor who you thought you knew, you could trust, turns out to be somebody stealing from you to get the money they needed for their drugs.
Well, that's true. And then also you layer up on top of that the counterculture was rising at that time, the drug subculture. Kids were kind of rebelling against their parents' values. The Vietnam War had been dragging on, and it was beginning to wind down, and there was protest against that. And there were just, and the beginnings of some centralization of power, more power in Washington. And there are just many threads in this book. They call it a big crime story as literature, and it is, but it also has an essential love story in it. It's history that some may think they know, but perhaps they do not know. It's geopolitical intrigue in it. It's one man's search for God, and there's an Elvis thread in this book. And I'll be signing books Monday down at Marlowe's Barbecue and meeting.
Right down the street from Graceland.
Yeah, right down the street, meeting a lot of friends coming into town for Elvis Week. And the Elvis fans have read this. The Elvis fan who like good crime and mystery and thrillers, to find out that, there is an Elvis thread in it, written by somebody who's a lifelong Elvis fan from Tupelo, and that it recaptures old Tupelo and old Memphis in the 70s. They live again in this book.
Well, and that was a very dear time to me, because that was when I was right out of college, and I remember it vividly. I mean, it was like in high school. I graduated high school in '69, and I was active in Scouts right up to the time I graduated, but you didn't even want to wear your Boy Scout uniform. I mean, that's how anti-anything everybody was, that you wouldn't wear your Boy Scout uniform to scout meets, because you're afraid your friends would say, hey, man, you're going to join the Army next, And it was, and then you would go off to college. I remember going to Texas Tech my freshman year, and it was pretty much a cowboy place, and so I never saw drugs. But then the next year I transferred to the University of Texas, and let me tell you, I was like you. I was green and was not prepared for what I was about to see there. I mean, I'm talking about people in trees on campus smoking pot, walking down the sidewalks on the main drag, Guadalupe, across from campus, smoking a joint.
Well, I know what you mean. When of course, when we were in high school, it was a different time, and if you had a date with a girl and you took her home and you got a little peck on the cheek or something, I mean, that was a big night. But then when we came when we came into college, came out of college, and were asked to go deep undercover, we went into a subculture that we were totally unprepared to deal with, where intimacy was just like a handshake, and a lot of I won't say a lot, but some guys lost their way, because suddenly they were in a foreign world, and they were just bombarded with this buffet of forbidden things, and they kind of lost their way.
I've wondered how you do separate yourself. I know there's a movie out right now with Johnny Depp, or I saw it on television just a couple of weeks ago. Johnny Depp and and Al Pacino.
I saw that movie. Yeah,
And
Donnie Brasco.
Yeah, and I thought it was very, very well done
Yeah.
because his wife at some point asked him, he said, "You're turning into one of these." He said, "I'm not turning into one of them." He said, "I am one of them."
Yeah.
And eventually he gets out, and they give him a check for $500 and say thank you very much. And I think it illustrated very well what you're actually are talking about here. It's what it must have been like. That and the fact that you got to lie to everybody you meet, and you got to remember the lie. That's why my mother said, "Don't ever lie, Earl, because you're not good at it." Is that part of the thing when you were with the state the agency in Mississippi on drug? What was it called again? The enforcement
Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics.
When they were you majored in criminal justice in college,
Right?
Yeah, and then you got out. Did they give you profile tests that said we think you could be a good undercover agent? I mean, how did they know?
They just interviewed you in those days, and those days they still gave you IQ tests, which later were outlawed. But they gave you IQ test and physical tests, and they interviewed you, and they gave you psychological examinations, and I'm not sure how effective all that was, but it produced the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics went on to be named the top state drug enforcement agency in the United States by the federal government. So they had Ken Fairley, who was our director, and the guy who formed it all, I think did a pretty darn good job in picking people. You're never 100%, of course, but when you're undercover and deep undercover, you definitely have to think quick on your feet. And when somebody stares you right in the face, maybe with a gun, and says, "I think you're the man," you better be able to convince him otherwise. And so that happened many times. And I was held hostage when I was working undercover. They decided that they had a better plan than selling me their heroin. They decided they would just kill me, take my money, and keep their drugs, and they'd be way ahead. And so I was held hostage for about 6 hours in a little cabin down on the Mississippi-Louisiana border, mouse hanging out of the trees at midnight, straight out of B-horror movies, everything that in your childhood that went bump in the night, it all coalesced that night around that time, and my whole life flashed before my eyes. And one of the gentlemen there with me looking at me chewed up and ate the old double-edged Gillette razor blade and swallowed them.
While he was talking to you.
And when he grinned at me, the blood just bubbled up and gushed out of the corners of his mouth and ran down on his throat. And he put his finger in his mouth and asked me if I'd like some. And I said, "I don't believe I'd care for any." And then he took a whole box of long stem kitchen matches and lit them all at once and bent over that flame with the blood rushing out of his mouth like some vampire. He then swallowed the flame, and that's when I thought I was going to die, and when it triggered whatever it triggers in you, and my whole life just flashed before my eyes, and I saw images of me as a toddler that I could never consciously recall just begin to flash by me in kind of kaleidoscope type images, and some of that's detailed.
Don't tell us what happened next, because we're going to take a break. I mean, we know you made it, but we don't know how. So we're going to take a quick break. We're talking with Merle Temple, the author of Ghostly Shade of Pale, a native of Tupelo, Mississippi. And we'll be back with more right after this.
Now back to the Earl Farrell Show on AM 990.
We've got a special guest in today, Merle Temple. He is a native of Tupelo, Mississippi, who was graduated at Mississippi University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. He was with the Bell system as security manager, and he's just written a book, A Ghostly Shade of Pale, and A Rented World. Is that another part, or is that the subtitle to this?
No, that'll be the sequel to
The sequel to it, okay. And he's been on a tour of the country doing interviews and signing his book. He's got a book signing coming up Monday, and where's it going to be?
We'll be down at Marlowe's here in Memphis, Marlowe's Barbecue. We said we'd be there signing books until good books and good barbecue run out.
We'll never run out of barbecue.
And we know that never happens.
Interestingly, they said, because I've done stories with them before, and really nice people, and they said that Elvis used to sit down for some cheese trays and stuff like that, and a few barbecue sandwiches every once in a while, but he never did ever actually come in himself. And but really good people, and they're one of the few businesses that were there before Elvis died, and they're still there and in business. Everything else up and down the street has changed because I got here. He passed in August of '77. I got here in January of '78. And I've been covering him for 37 years. I never met the guy. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I know everything about him, but I don't know. Never met him. Now, okay, we left off where you were being held captive, and the guy's eating a double-edged razor blade and taking kitchen matches and building a little bonfire, and what was he, cooking the blood or eating the fire?
Well, I think he was trying to impress me, but I wanted to assure him he'd already crossed that threshold.
So you're sitting there. Are you bound and gagged, or do you just sit in the room and he's holding you hostage at gunpoint?
I'm sitting there with he has a shotgun on me, and his Confederate there has a pistol.
So two of them, one of you, and you're not armed.
Well, I had gone somewhere undercover, not thinking that they were going to approach us then, and I had to take my gun and hide it in the car. So actually, I was unarmed at that very moment, but I was later able to get to my gun. But we'll leave it at that.
Are these boys still with us?
Oh yeah, they are.
They're not with us. They're somewhere.
As far as I know, they are. I mean,
still walking.
I know that one of them had to go away for a while, but they're I think last I heard, at least, I don't know. They're still with us. So many people in this book that might be based on real life characters. I was asked, if anybody's going to show up and want to punch us in the face or anything, if they thought they recognized themselves. And I said, I don't think so. I said, most of the people are gone now, either by natural or unnatural causes.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because the criminal element, over the years, 40 years of covering news, it's not a long, lengthy career. And the ones that do make it a long time, it's really always kind of surprising, that they make it that long, because it's not a business that you survive long into. When you started developing your characters for the book, was there somebody that you kind of came up with, an alter ego of your own, that you said, or was this kind of like somebody you said, this is kind of part me, part somebody else?
Well, Michael Parker, the central character, is loosely based on me, and they say that Southern Gothic writers explore their triumphs and failures in their books and their characters, and I would have to say that I plead guilty to that with Michael, and so he's near and dear to my heart. And when we're talking about the movies or a TV series out in Hollywood, I'd very much like to have some control, if that ever happens, about how he is treated and portrayed, because it is personal.
Well, if you ever talk to anybody that's ever sold a book or a screenplay to Hollywood, that's very seldom do you ever get to maintain it. They say, you sign it over and wave it goodbye.
Well, that is true, and so we're being careful, and probably we'll have a better chance of keeping it close to what it is if we go with a TV series on network, and so that's advice I've gotten, and so we're kind of leaning that way, and we've already been brainstorming with people in Hollywood about a possible name of a TV series for this, because A Ghostly Shade of Pale is a good book title and a good movie title. Mm-hmm. But it's a little long for a TV show. So we've been brainstorming that, and we've come out with a couple that we think would work. And so we'll just see what happens. It's, like I said, a fairy tale trip, met a lot of nice people, had experiences I certainly thought I'd never had at 65 years old. And so we're just blessed.
Well, I think that's the other thing, too, is that a lot of people ask me, said, you ever going to retire? And I go, hey, do what, man? I mean, it's like every day. Today I was on a farm interviewing some really cool people that have changed their lives. This afternoon I'm interviewing a book author. I'm talking to some other folks, going to check in with the farmer's market. I mean, I'm doing things that I would almost pay to do under any other circumstances. I mean, it's a very interesting life. You've been on a tour doing what I do all the time, and it's like every day. But I think the message there really is to live life. In fact, that's one of the things the young lady interviewed today. I said, what would you tell other people? Because she had spent 10 years working for Hancock Fabric in their office. I think they're in Pontotoc, and doing computer programming. Didn't even have a window in the office. And now she spends from sun up to sundown outside, picking vegetables at the farmer's market. And she said, I just had no idea this new life was waiting for me, and it's just been incredible. And her husband, he was a furniture frame maker, and then here you come along. You know, you were in security for Bell, and all of a sudden you retire, and you go, I think I'll write a book, and look where that has taken you.
Well, and too, Earl, I tell everybody who the joy of this really is meeting so many people, new people, and being reunited with people I haven't seen in 30 and 40 years. Some of them went through some pretty hard times, and I always tell them as we are at these book signings and reminiscing, I said, isn't it just incredible how much better looking we've gotten through the years?
See, I would have really made my character in the book really good looking too. Say, this man was absolutely the most handsome man, based on me, of course. We're talking with the author of A Ghostly Shade of Pale, Merle Temple. We're going to take a traffic break, come back, talk some more about the book and more about him. We've got a special guest in studio today. Merle Temple is the author of A Ghostly Shade of Pale. It is a crime. Is it set back in the 70s?
Yeah, it's set in the 70s entirely, and mostly North Mississippi to Memphis. There's a little bit of everything there. There's a Bill Street.
I was going to ask you if you have landmarks that people are going to recognize.
Yeah. Everybody says a book is so visual, and that's why they think it would make a good movie. And it is. I went back through one of the near final drafts, first drafts, and began to add descriptors from front to back, and that really made the characters and the scenes come to life. You could see what they saw, feel what they felt, and you're right there with them. So you got the Dixie Mafia, you've got some members, you've got small airfields in Mississippi in this time being used to ferry guns by mercenaries into Central America. They weren't coming back empty. They came back loaded. On a question if it was sanctioned or unsanctioned. And just so many diverse elements to the book. And like I said earlier, I said folks who, especially who lived through this era, I think will like it because old Memphis and old Tupelo and all of that and all that background, it all lives again.
Well, the thing is, I always thought that, I was just kind of made up stuff about the Dixie Mafia, but there's so much stuff. When I got here, I went to where Buford Pusser was the sheriff and met a lot of people over there. And I mean, that whole county was, there was a lot of stuff going on there.
Well, actually, Earl, also fictionalized in this book, there's a telling of when there was a strike against organized crime right across the border into Mississippi. Some people had gone down there to set up where they thought maybe the climate and the government officials were a little more hospitable. And when we got wind of it and came in to hit their stronghold, and actually there were some elements that actually were in McNairy County in the old days, in Pusser's days, who were operating there, and some of the Mafia families and the Dixie Mafia, and out of that strike in real life, I was rewarded with a contract put out on my life. And,
congratulations.
I was lured out by two contract killers at the old Horn Lake exit, which looks nothing then like it does now.
It was remote.
Oh, it was very remote. It was an old abandoned service station where we met, and it was just a standoff when I realized that I'd been lured out on the offer of information that just turned out to be an opportunity to try to hit me, and then we had and my police radio was out that day, and my wife couldn't reach me to tell me that.
I was starting to see a series of things. You had your gun, you left your gun in the car with two guys trying to kill you. Well, and then your police radio goes out. When you go meet this guy, it turns out they're going to kill you.
Yeah, and one of our informants inside the organization had called my wife at home and told her, asked for me, and she said, he's not here. And she said, get a hold of him and tell him it's a setup. They're going to kill him. And so when she tried and couldn't raise me, and I blundered into that and blundered out of that. I blundered into a lot of things. By the grace of God, I blundered out. But you were young, you thought you were going to live forever. You were invincible.
You look back on some of those incidents, though, and realize how fortunate you were to have made it through them.
Absolutely, yeah. And so it's a lot of that's fictionalized here in the book. And I was in Columbus yesterday, Mississippi, for an interview, and that brought back a lot of memories because 37 years ago, which is also fictionalized in the book, we were doing a heroin deal down there and taking went to arrest the people out in the countryside, and there was a railroad trestle right up the road with a clump of pine trees, and we didn't know they had a sniper guarding the deal, sitting behind that tree with a high-powered rifle, and he opened fire on us, and terrible gun battle ensued. And so when I went in down there, those memories kind of came flooding back.
You're like me. Everywhere I go in Memphis, I go, well, so I went to a double murder there, some years of heroin deals and hit squads. The book is A Ghostly Shade of Pale, and the author is Merle Temple. He's from Tupelo, Mississippi. Would you look back on your career, and then you're experiencing this career? It is kind of interesting how some things you went through all your life to pave the way for your next chapter in your life. And
yeah, I certainly never thought all of those years ago that I'd ever be writing about it. Never occurred.
You were just developing material.
Yeah, it's and so in these author forums, people always go around the table and they ask the authors, well, where do you get your inspiration from? And some guy will always say, well, I meditate a lot, and another guy will say, well, I have a vivid imagination and I read a lot. And then there's always some guy there that you suspect his inspiration might be chemically induced. And then they get to me and they say, what about you? And I say, I just remember.
I just remember. Well, it's an interesting read. Looking forward to reading it myself. You'll be at Marlowe's on Elvis Presley Boulevard Monday. And what time?
We'll be there signing from 2 until about dinner time.
All right, check him out, Merle Temple. And the book, again, is A Ghostly Shade of Pale.